Okay, once again, we apologize. We're not going to use Sportscaster. Sportscaster's not working right now, so we're going to be on, once again, YouTube, um, Facebook, and Twitter. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So we will be on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter for until Sportscaster fixes this problem. Once again, we apologize to the Sportscaster viewers. So if you're on Twitter, you can come over to watch us on Twitter. You can view us there. So once again, thanks for joining us. We will have the Willie Fritz show in just a few moments. Once again, I apologize. My apologies to everybody on Sportscaster. We're not getting your connections. So once again, so let's begin. Let's turn on the Current. The Current is a podcast, Tulane produced podcast. Andrew Allegrella is the play-by-play announcer. He will be doing these formats. And we'll be having the Willie Fritz show. When they come out, we will play them on the air for you. So once again, thanks for coming in. So let me go ahead and set this up for you. I apologize. For my so once again, let me get this overlay switched out. And there we go. And we will begin in just a second. We'll get this up on the screen. And we will play the video in a second. Just wait for it to load. Should come up in a second. Save.
This is the Willie Fritz Show on The Current, brought to you by Bryan Subaru, Capital One, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana. There's the snap. It's a play action. McMillan rolls to the left. Nobody is there. He can stroll past the pylon. Touchdown, Tulane.
5 seconds left. Inbound to Clark. Top of the key. Drives in the paint. Right hand floater off the glass. It's good.
Quick feed left side. Lost it at space. Rainbow's a three. Book it. McMillan steps up. He throws middle. Caught by McCluskey. Breaks out of a tackle. 10, 5. Angles far side.
Are you kidding me?
Touchdown, Tulane.
Are you kidding me?
Roll wave.
Roll wave. Let's get a win.
Welcome into this week's edition of the Willie Fritz Show. We've got a jam-packed lineup. Coach is here in his office as we talk, but also coming up in a little bit, we've got Doc Stewart, who's done just a fantastic job for this program when it comes to the AAC COVID advisory panel. He's run this program incredibly well from the medical side. And then, Coach, got an interview with Adam Amin, who called the Houston game for ESPN a year ago. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of that Houston game. We'll talk about South Alabama Navy, but just quickly looking back on that's got to be like you've won national championships and all that stuff, but that still has to stand out as one of your favorite finishes that you've ever coached.
Yeah, that was a neat finish, and probably the thing that was neatest about it is, you know, when that game ended, we were the only football game being played in the United States, well, probably all over the world at that point. And so we had just a bunch of people watching, and I can always gauge how many people are watching the game on how many texts I get when I walk into my office. And like last week, I must have had 120, 130 text messages. Everybody's watching on ESPN2, but that game set a record. I was way over 200, you know, and then I try to send one back, you know, thanks, appreciate it, whatever. And then everybody gets you back again, you know, and I just was like, crap, you know. And so I was doing that for about an hour or two, but no, it was a lot of fun. It was a great conclusion to a game. You know, unique play with the kneel play, big play by Jalen McCluskey on the catch and breaking those two tackles, and just a great night for Tulane football.
Just walk us through once again the conversation you guys had on the sideline as the team comes out there with, I guess it's 18 seconds left to play or whatever it happens to be. You guys have essentially the length of the field to go, and then you decide to call the fake knee. As a coaching staff, what was going on in the headsets?
Well, we were over there on the sideline, and Will had worked on it quite a bit. And you know, even some of our players were anticipating the call. You know, I heard a couple of them call it, and you know, we ran it, and everything kind of worked out on it. Amari did a good job of getting out of bounds. Darius Bradwell did not block a guy in the back. He could have, and if we hadn't have got the kickoff return, Nick Anderson got as much as he could, got down, allowed us to be able to have enough time to run 2 plays, run the kneel play, and then we had one timeout in our pocket, and so our plan was to, now you got the whole field that you can throw the ball to. You don't have to throw to the sideline and get out of bounds. So we were going to throw the ball downfield, catch it. We had a good play, and then call timeout and kick field goal. Well, Jalen went ahead and broke the tackle and scored a touchdown, and I think there's maybe 3 seconds on the clock afterwards. So things worked out, and sometimes they work out, and it's very good for you. I like being on that side of it.
Pretty remarkable, too, to have that completion come basically in between 3 defenders. That had to be the perfect pass. It was. It had to be a great catch, and it was.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens with, defenders are thinking someone else is going to make the play. You got to go make the play, man. And,
I don't know what's happening with this damn
I've been on
Twitter.
the other side. The Saints were on the other side a few years ago. It's just fortunate deal. It's you work on those situations and then it happens, and you got to execute.
All right, so let's talk about the here and now. And first off, the contract extension, which again I know was discussed basically back, I think, in the winter, December, January, but finally gets announced this week. What does that all mean to you?
Well, Susan and I, my wife Susan and I, just feel really blessed. We love New Orleans. We love working at Tulane. We love the people we're working for. It's just, this program, we feel like we got it going in the right direction, and we put a lot of hard work to get it in this direction. And I'm just, honored that
I don't know what's going on with fucking Twitter.
Do a contract like this for me. There's not a lot of job security in this profession.
They're always having problems.
As I've mentioned
I'm about to
before,
see
we got this deal where you got to win in order to maintain your job, regardless of how you treat people, how you work, how hard you work, how organized you are, and I'm glad that people are seeing it going in the correct direction. I appreciate Troy Dannon. I appreciate Mike Fitz, President Fitz, for having faith in me, the board, everybody, and I just feel so lucky.
If I'm not mistaken, is your agent a Tulane law graduate?
Yes, he is. When I got this job, I wanted to have somebody smart.
Yeah. Somewhat insignificant there, but nice to know that it's someone.
I'll tell you something.
It's kept in the family here.
Let me tell you something that's kind of funny today. We've got signals that we do on the sideline. And you put these signs up, and you got all these different pictures of people up there. And our guys had Jerry Springer on there. And
yes.
I said, now you guys know he's a Tulane graduate. And they had no idea he's a Tulane graduate.
How about that?
Yeah.
How about that? We've got to put.
Kind of interesting. They just picked it for. I'm not going to give away any secrets, but
no, that's fine.
There's a reason they picked him, but they had no idea he was a Tulane graduate.
I'm going to have to try to decode exactly what that reason might be, whether it's like the DNA testing that he would always do on his shows or something like that. Maybe that means something. Let's talk about Alabama. Right off the top, what'd you think of that game for your
Tulane.
We didn't start off great, and we took a little while just a block away. Missed assignment.
Like I told you, you have to.
I thought they did an excellent job of coming out and exploiting some matchups on.
Yeah, I told you have to do
a better job. It's just all different when it's real. I thought defensively, we made some excellent adjustments.
What time?
In the second half, I think they had 7:20 yards offense.
Yeah, 7:20 my time.
Yeah, I'm doing it. Okay, so.
And then
I'll see if I can come on.
Offensively, we just started grinding away.
All right.
I knew there was going to be some growing pains. That's the first time Keon Howard's played in basically 3 years.
Go ahead. Go back. Have a good night.
Super Sam, he's in.
Super Sam?
No,
we had too many drops.
Oh, all right.
And too many missed assignments.
All right. Okay, once again,
in
Isaac
isolation,
Elliman
a slow
at his
start
lunch.
can
We
be
don't want to bother
not
him.
a big
so,
deal, right? Especially because of the situation that everybody's going through, the way that practice has been
once
throughout
again,
the
we
course of camp,
apologize
the
to the
things that are new.
sportscaster people.
Piggybacked
We had a
off
little
of last year.
with our
Is there
connection,
concerns
so now
about
we're
slow
on.
starts
So once
for
again,
you,
thanks for
or is this totally
being patient
separate
with
from
us.
a season ago at which, whether it was the Navy game or the Temple game, where the slow starts became a frustration point?
No, we certainly don't want to get in the habit of doing that. And we had a few games last year where we were, it did have some slow starts, but, it's, you always go back and you look at it and you're like, gosh darn it, if this guy would have blocked here, we got to play. If the back would have stayed inside and for some reason he went outside, we would have had a good play. This guy doesn't drop the ball. It's like the Southern Miss game in the bowl game.
Yes.
There was a reason for lack of success. It wasn't they're just whipping butt up front and we can't do anything. When that happens, that's a booger.
Right.
And when you got the right play called and everybody does their assignment, it's a loss of one because their Jimmies are bigger than your Joes. But that hasn't been the case. And when that occurs, we just got to be assignment sound.
So the flip side of that conversation becomes you guys have obviously been very adept at making halftime adjustments. Was there anything with the South Alabama game that you thought was uniquely impactful that helped, whether it's the defensive line get after it, the secondary hold up, the offense moving a little bit in the second half? Anything unique in that game?
Came talk to me.
Well, I think Jack
I don't
Curtis
want
did a
him
great
to
job.
see him at lunch.
Jalen Monroe on the dude that was catching all the passes. And
I want the kids
he
say,
wouldn't
yeah,
even
you
catch him in
listen
the
to
second half. We did a little bit
you're
more
gonna
zone
get your ass.
coverage.
You're gonna
and
fail you.
tricked him into throwing some balls into coverage. It looked like we were playing one thing, playing another. Probably didn't do enough of that in the first half. Thought we tackled a little bit better. We got him in some long yardage situations, and Cam Sample, Patrick Johnson are able to pin their ears back and come. And those guys really do an excellent job rushing the passer. Kind of warmed down a little bit up front, and we're able to run the ball effectively. I think Keon felt a little bit more comfortable in that fourth quarter probably than he did the first three quarters. So a lot of things. And then also I thought we did a nice job in the kicking game. For game one, we covered punts and kicks well. Merrick did a good job with touchbacks. And, I thought we did a good job. We had a real nice punt return. We had a real nice kickoff return and got us some good starting field position.
All right, so let's talk about Navy. How much was the schedule, if at all, changed around this week because of the situation that we thought we might deal with, then we didn't deal with Hurricane Sally?
Oh, totally changed around. We got done practicing Monday, and I told the guys, all right, man, go pack your stuff. Possibility of us staying at a hotel till Saturday. Oh my goodness. And so we packed all our stuff up. We went out to the hotel, and we luckily only stayed there for a night. But the new guys, were kind of looking at me cross-eyed when they were looking outside and seeing perfect weather and everything else. But I said, you talk to these dudes from New Orleans. And,
yes.
And I've even got a few guys that are transplanted Katrina guys, that lived here and had to move and stayed, someplace else, after they moved because of what happened. So we got to take it all seriously. We're lucky, with this, what President Fitz and the university are doing with COVID. And we're lucky that they take care of the students in regard to this. Other places they wouldn't. It'd be every man and woman and child for themselves. And we were able to keep the guys out of harm's way, and luckily nothing happened.
From a football standpoint, this is the wrong team to lose a day of practice to, though.
No, you're right. But heck, that's the way of the world.
Yeah. So with this Navy triple option, we talk about it every single year, but what makes them so much more unique than anybody else that happens to run this? You've seen it a bunch now. We see it from Army and Air Force and Navy. But what makes them a more challenging team to coach your guys up for?
Just very disciplined.
Yeah.
They can do it in their sleep. You do this, they're going to do this. You do this, they're going to do that. There's a little feeling out process with them at the beginning of the game to see exactly what defense you're going to be in. But once they determine that, they've seen them all. So it's not like, oh gosh, it's a defense we've never seen before. There's only a few ways to play them. And, and if you're not assignment sound, they're going to make you pay for it.
Last question for you. Tajay Spears had a fantastic game against South Alabama. The way that BYU ran, does that give him an opportunity?
I think, as long as we block people, we're going to have an opportunity every week, to get him out in open spaces, and he's a dynamic back. We're just really fortunate that we've got so many good backs. We got Tajay, he's got great speed. Cam Carroll, who's also got great speed and good size. Stephon Hutterson, I thought had a couple really nice runs last Saturday. Amari Jones, you put him in the backfield. Boy, that was a nice cut on his touchdown run there at the end of the game, wasn't it? That guy grabbed a whole lot of air, and then YG Booker, hopefully we're going to get him out there, get him going and playing back there in the backfield. He's a little banged up, but he can run, Tajay and YG Booker are both, 10, 600-meter guys. And Amari's got great speed. Cam Carroll's got great speed. Hud can run. So we got good speed and good size and good balance back there.
Coach, thanks so much for your time. Best of luck against Navy this week.
Thank you. Roll wave.
All right, Doc Stewart, let's start with the simple question. 1 week of football for Tulane under its belt. Did you learn anything from game week?
I don't know that we learned a whole lot new from game week that we didn't already know or were already prepared for, which was nice. We did go through and do the extra testing on Friday. So that was new, but it went very well, very easily. Obviously, the protocols at the conference as far as talking to our opponents ahead of time and presenting to the medical advisory group just to get that final blessing and approval was new for us. We hadn't done it as Tulane. We had done it the week before for the games and the conference the week before. So it's been interesting. But no, I don't think we ran into anything new or anything that we weren't expecting.
So we're sitting here Monday afternoon, and I recognize the answer to this question might be no, but do we know much about the post-game testing yet?
Not yet. We should be getting some of that quickly, thanks to now Hurricane Sally,
Yes.
and knowing some of the testing impediment that might be placed in front of us. We actually did our post-game testing on Sunday with the approval of the conference, and hopefully we won't need to, but also have permission to move our Wednesday testing to Thursday for Navy. But waiting for everything to come back, but very hopeful that we don't see anything.
At least to my count, the first conference game to be postponed so far. I think I've counted 5 games, including AAC teams total, that have been postponed. But the first one between 2 conference teams is Houston and Memphis. Was that something that made its way to the advisory committee meeting that was discussed in front of everyone? Or since it was a week in advance, was that preemptive? How did that come together?
No, we actually, Memphis and Houston, I guess everyone probably can figure out, since Memphis is not playing and Houston is playing, that's where the problem lies. The other thing then is that we knew very quickly that, and last week being Labor Day, our call was actually on Tuesday. We knew we were having issues up at Memphis. And so we talked about that. I guess it was actually Thursday morning was when we started seeing that Wednesday testing coming back from Memphis. And then it was on our Friday morning call when we were discussing our South Alabama game that we had the significant conversation and actually took probably a majority of our time to talk about the Memphis-Houston game. And at that point, Memphis was testing again on Saturday. So the decision to move the game was not made in the Friday call. We talked about the need to wait for their Saturday testing. And then even with all of that, the actual decision to move and postpone games does not lie with the medical advisory group. It actually lies with the president. So we were in the process of waiting on Saturday's test results to come back. And we were actually notified that the Memphis and University of Houston presidents had talked and decided to go ahead and postpone that game. So it was postponed for the presidents. We have another call today with the medical advisory group, so I'm sure that the Memphis-Houston game is going to be discussed.
So that brings up kind of another interesting point. Right, the presidents get to make the final decision, although I'm sure that the committee will make a recommendation based on their best knowledge about here's the situation. You guys now need to make your best judgment. Going through it for the first time, I think from the outside, fans could say, well, they're going to do everything they can to get on the field. And maybe some fans would feel heaven and earth would be moved to play football at the risk of better judgment. After going through it one time, do you feel like everyone was making the best sound decisions from a medical standpoint now that you're inside that room?
Yes. I don't think there's any question about it. I mean, there was a lot of talk about whether or not to go ahead and make that decision on Friday to postpone. But we knew that Memphis had another test. And so the fact that they had a large number of tests on Wednesday, we kind of sat back and said, okay, if Saturday tests have no new positives, then Memphis still might be able to play. Now, we also realized that was unlikely to happen, but we didn't want to get ahead of the testing and the science. So we were actually waiting for those results to come back, and the presidents intervened even before we had gotten to that point. So they probably made the decision that we would have recommended, but we had not gotten to that point to actually make the recommendation to the president.
Well, certainly helpful from the committee standpoint, I suppose. I'd say the other big notable COVID-related story in college football over the weekend was Virginia Tech and Virginia getting postponed to a date later to be determined. Now, Virginia Tech is not going to play for the first 3 weeks of the season because of a couple of cancellations. One thing Virginia Tech did put out after the fact was what appears to be ACC guidelines in terms of minimum number of players. The only specification that had was 7 scholarship offensive linemen must be available. I think the Big 12 has put out something similar, plus 53 available players from scholarship. Does the AAC have something similar? Is that a public piece of information? I guess, was it completely obvious based on those protocols that Memphis was going to fall below those guidelines?
We haven't set a number. We're certainly aware of the Big 12 and then the ACC's numbers, and those are certainly very reasonable numbers, and how they're going about it. But we have a lot more that we take into consideration. So if if there's a deal, and I'll put it all on Tulane right now. So if the Monday testing, we've got 3 to 5 guys that are positive, and you take another 8 people who are contact traced, And then on Wednesday, you now have 7 or 8 that are positive. And then you go into the Friday morning, really we're looking at that trend. And so we might say as the medical advisory group that we're okay with the game going forward as long as there are no positives on the rapid testing that comes back. And that if there are 2 positives, 5 positives, whatever, and we might or might not pick a number, that we would want to either reconvene and discuss it further, or if there are positives on that rapid test, then the recommendation of the medical advisory group is that it not be played. So we meet actually before the rapid test results are back, and data that we're collecting on Thursday night before the weekend games. And actually, I'm going to give a shout out to Kyle, our director of tickets, because Kyle is now been somewhat repurposed to help with the spreadsheet for the conference to put all these numbers together as far as what's going on, the positives and the different scores and things that we're watching.
Not everybody up in the press box at South Alabama. There's plenty of people that are thrilled that we're playing football, and I'm certainly one of them because my employment depends on it. But reasonable minds can kind of go back and forth, right? Like the conflicted feeling. Should we be here? Obviously, you feel like it's safe, but do you ever have those moments? Did you ever have those moments when you pause and say, maybe this is an undertaking that's deeply challenging?
There were times. Well, let me put it this way: when we finished the game on Saturday, my first response to Troy was, I can promise you that there were times when I never thought we would have finished the game with this. And not just from, is it transmitted on the field, but just everything we've been through from March 13th till now, kind of thing. There were lots of times, and Troy and I were both saying, even up to recent 2 or 3 weeks ago, there were times when you thought, gosh, this wasn't going to happen. But there were a lot of times that rational minds would have sat back and thought, what in the world are we trying to do?
Right.
And can we actually accomplish this? And equal number of times when we sat down and it was like, oh my gosh, look at all the time and effort we're putting into this that is not ever going to happen. And so, yeah, I think there were a lot of times that we went through that. But at the same time, we sat back and realized, as a society, how important sport is, and especially in the South, how important football is. And so we kind of started with the premise of how do we make this as safe as possible?
Right.
And that's really kind of where we've gone all along. Again, with the understanding the health and safety of the student athlete was paramount, that if we couldn't do this in a way that we were comfortable that the student athletes would be as safe as possible, that we were reducing the risk as much as possible, then that's is kind of, where we are in all of it. So that's the piece, we make it safe and come up with a set of guidelines that would allow that to happen. And so far, after 2 weeks, but with cancellations, and we said from the beginning this was going to happen.
Yes.
So, not surprised that we've got some games that are canceled, or that we're going to have games that move forward, but with a significant reduction in available student athletes. But if we think that a game, especially now going into the American play, if we think that a game is not safe, then we're going to recommend it not be played.
All right, Doc, I'll get you out of here on this one, and I will let you brag on Tulane for just a second, because as you look across college football, we just talked about Memphis and Virginia Tech and any number of games that have been upended or teams that have paused practices. I don't think, but for maybe one day, Tulane has paused practices. What has it been about whether it's what President Fitz has allowed to happen, the way that Coach Fritz has run his program, the way that you and Troy Dannon have outlined things, the way the student athletes have behaved themselves, I suppose. What has been different and unique in your eyes about Tulane through the past couple of weeks and months?
Well, first off, let me say that you're violating one of these cardinal rules in sports medicine. You never turn to each other with a minute left in the game and say, "Oh my gosh, look, the game's almost over. We didn't have anybody hurt, and we didn't have to run on the field, and we didn't have to do any of that." So if it happens, it's on you. Just so that we're clear.
That's funny. That. Yeah, it's the sports broadcasting equivalent of pointing out the no-hitter. It's the sports broadcasting equivalent of saying, "Hey, this baseball game's moving really fast," and then it slows down to a crawl. So we've all got our own. So I apologize for stepping on the landmine.
So having said that and realizing that now it's your fault, it's really all of those people that you outlined. I mean, President Fitz has given us the ability and the resources to be able to make sure that everything is as safe as possible. Troy has gone and fought for this. Troy and Coach, we've been very clear with the student athletes from the beginning that this is not going to be like any other year. This is not going to be your typical college football season, that if you want to play football, that this year there are going to be sacrifices that you would never have been asked to make. Normally the sacrifices, you got to work hard, you got to, do all these other things. But now, post-game celebration, being able to go out Saturday night, being able to do these kinds of things are no longer not necessarily permitted, but permitted. And
wise decision if you want college football games for you down the road.
Exactly. And we've talked about this. We've talked about, being very careful of who you hang out with, of where you go to eat meals, where you do these kinds of things, who you bring into your room or whose room or house you may go to. All of these things in the past where you could, let's just go hang out and play video games. Now you've got to be aware of who you're going and hanging out with. And from the very beginning, we've been very clear about that. And, we saw over the summer and, to date, that they have, the Tulane football team is serious. I mean, this is, from good to great. This is them being serious about it. And I tell you, being in the locker room after the game, the South Alabama, incredibly proud of them, because they came in and this was not the locker room of a team that just won a game at the very end and snatched it out. This was the locker room of a team who was not happy with their performance, with the sacrifices they've made, and this was what they did. So I think they realize what they've given up and what they're giving up in order to play this season. And I think that, they are going to continue to do what they can do in order to play football. I mean, I've had, you've seen opt-outs across the country, across the conference. We've had things. And as I would come in, some of the stuff that we were, in the medical advisory group and meeting with the commissioner, there were schools where, the student athletes may or may not have wanted to play, obviously opt-outs, but I would come through, through Wilson and at practice or seeing some of the guys, and they would stop me on a regular basis and very much be, Doc, we got to play. You got to make sure we play. So, those were the kinds of things that we were seeing. So it was always very exciting to have that and have the guys know of what we were trying to accomplish, and them being behind us with that.
Yeah, I think there's some metaphor about everybody rowing the boat in the same direction. Clearly, from top to bottom, it sounds like that's been the case. Dr. Stewart, thank you so much for your time and for your work. And if something goes wrong, feel free to point the finger where you need to.
Don't worry, I'm going to have a copy of this so that when it happens, I can play it for Troy and the president. So
that's fun.
This could be your last podcast.
I have too much fun, so fingers crossed. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
All right, Adam. So take me back to production meetings that week. What storylines did you think you would be following going into Houston and Tulane?
Man, we went in that week just kind of wanting to get a sense of what the Tulane program was about. And that's something that stuck out to me last year, especially because I had two analysts in Matt Hasselbeck and Pat McAfee who were frankly new, like, to the modern workings of college football. And it's so weird to say because it's not like they're that old. Like, Pat's, around our age. Like, he was playing 10 years ago, 11 years ago in college. But at the same time, it was so much has changed in just a short period of time. So for Matt and Pat especially, being new back on the scene of college football, they really wanted to get, like, the nuts and bolts of, like, what this means to the school, like what it means to these programs to be, on a Thursday night game. And again, that your mileage may vary in terms of what that means to you individually as, like, a fan of a team or a student at a university. But, for these guys, it was a big deal. Like, they wanted to know, like, the ins and outs. So I actually have my, like, notes in front of me. And I remember they bugged everybody, by the way. And that's what was so awesome about those guys. I mean that in the most positive way. Like, they wanted to meet, like, the person who is, like, the assistant to the head coach. They want to meet, the mom who's, like, coming in to, like, drop off cookies that week or whatever it is. We have a story on Liz Devlin Ziegler, who has been obviously one of the most beloved athletic department employees for 3 decades at this point. And I wrote down her dad, John, was a longtime college and NFL coach. Her brother, Mike, was an offensive line coach for the Texans who used to play at Iowa. Her son, Dane, of course, the week prior, and I think this would have been the second game of the year, got his first tackle as a walk-on. And we wanted to talk about that. Like, they wanted to expose stories like that too. And that's something that I do feel like, now that I've kind of stepped away, I do feel like that does get lost in the shuffle sometimes, is those really individualized stories about people that are close to the program that make an impact. So that was certainly one thing that stuck out just in meetings and that day, that Wednesday going around campus and getting the shirt, which I happen to be wearing right now from the department. But that was off the field. In terms of on the field stuff, it was learning about the elements of Will Hall's triple option look. You hear what kind of elements do we have in this really high up tempo offense? We had penalty issues the first couple of games. How are you going to, mitigate those issues against a really solid defensive team like Houston? And I remember kind of just having a chat with Willie and getting to know Willie for the first time. And I remember going through, like, my notes on Willie and, expansive resume, a defensive back for Ron Randleman at Pittsburgh State in Kansas. And that was important that game because Ron was at the game. And I think at one point we got a chance to show him up and down, walking the sidelines in pregame. And that was meaningful to have a story like that to be able to share, to talk about, his wife, Susan, celebrating her birthday this week and how she goes out of her way to remember a lot of the kids. Justin McMillan, his great story after starting at LSU. I knew Jalen McCleskey very well, having called a ton of Oklahoma State games and seeing a lot of McCleskey as part of this ridiculously deep wide receiver core at Oak State and not really getting a decent chance, but deciding he wanted to go do something different. So all of those storylines we come in with, and Andrew, you know exactly what this is like. and I'm already rambling because it's, all these memories are flooding back, and all this connectivity that you and I and all of our colleagues go through as broadcasters. That's the connectivity we want, right? We get to tell this whole story over the course of the night, even when they're losing, like, hey, good for Willie Fritz. This is what they want to do. Now the comeback begins. The comeback charge starts. Now the plays at the end of the game are wild. And then McCleskey makes the incredible play off the McMillan pass to win the game. And at the end of the night, we get to ask him, Molly McGrath is on the sideline and gets to ask, your dad is on the sidelines here. What did he tell you before that play? And we get the big time players make big time plays quote after he made the biggest play. And that's what means a lot to us when we prepare for these games. And you have a different angle of it as the team broadcaster, but that's what means a lot to us parachuting in to do these games for these programs that maybe we'll only see once every 4 or 5 years individually as broadcasters. That's what really means a lot to us when we have that level of connectivity to tell a story like that.
And it's interesting, you bring up the depth of storylines that you guys came in with. And as a broadcaster, when the game starts to unfold, right, the first play is that huge touchdown. And then all of a sudden it's 28-7. Houston is out in front. As a broadcaster, you're saying, hey, at least I've got the storylines.
That's why we come in, right? It's why we come in prepared, and it's why we don't prep for the good games. We prep for the blowouts more so. Like the individualized and anecdotal prep that we come in with is really for the bigger picture. When I was at ESPN, there was a philosophy there that you wanted to humanize before you analyzed, and that's a good philosophy when it comes to college kids. It's good to be able to feel a connectivity to this wide receiver that you've probably never heard of, or maybe you've only heard of once, or you heard of 3 years ago, and then to give you a reason at home to care. And that's what means a lot to us. And that usually doesn't get to play out in the fashion that it got to play out in last year when we were in New Orleans. But I always remember that we're trying to come in with a reason for you to care. And that could be a stat. That could be, hey, you should watch this defense. They've given up 6 points in 5 games. They're really good.
Well, that particular day, it was De'Ara King was trying to set the FBS record for most touchdowns consecutively throwing and running in a singular game over Tim Tebow, which he did. That was the national angle that you guys came in with that day.
Yeah, we had that graphic ready to go. I remember putting it in the call, right out of the gate. As soon as he got that rushing touchdown, we're like, he's just set the new FBS record for that. Dane Roy, really great Australian punter. Naturally, our partner Pat McAfee was going to want to talk about an Australian punter. But I'm looking at my Houston notes from that game as well, and talking about De'Ara's torn ACL, which happened the year prior against Tulane. There's that level of connectivity, and that's more coincidental that, hey, we happen to be calling this game. But for him, that's got to mean something. He remembers the jerseys across the field when he was on the ground in pain. He remembers those things. And that's the level of connectivity that we're trying to create when we covered college football. And I think that's what makes the sport itself that much more special. I'm not saying it's better or worse than pro football. I think it's something unique. It's something that you can only find in this type of setting, in this type of sport.
Let's talk about the booth as the game starts to change. Let's go to the second half, because again, it was Houston dominated in the first half, and then it was different in the second half. When did you guys get the sense that things were tightening up in that second half, and what conversations were you having with producers, with McAfee, with Hasselbeck? What were those moments like in the second half as it started to turn?
Yeah, I think there was one quote that I gave to Matt and Pat that I still remember to this day, and Matt still references it once in a while too, and that really made me appreciate our relationship, because I felt like I learned a ton from those guys just because of their chemistry, their unity, having been teammates in a locker room before, and for me to kind of feel like I passed something on to them, it meant a lot. So we were getting into the second half. Houston starting to make some miscues. We remember the missed kicks as well in the second half of that game. And I think it was probably when it got to 28-21. I think I said we had a ball game in the Big Easy, and we felt like, all right, this is happening. This is something that could come right down to the wire. And during a commercial break, and this is, remember, for Pat, Matt, and I, and Molly on the field, this is only the third game we're doing together, right? I think this is week 4 actually of the season, but it's only the third game that we're doing together because there was a week that we didn't work because we didn't have a Thursday night game. So we're getting used to each other. We're getting acclimated with one another's kind of quirks and cadence and rhythms, and that's important. You want to know those things with your partner so that you can, you can have better timing and feel like you're connected in that sense. When we got to that point in the second half, I remember turning to both Matt and Pat and saying, hey, usually we get to dictate how we broadcast, right? We get to dictate our rhythm. That's what we've been doing for 2.5 games. So we get to dictate our rhythm, our cadence, our timing. I want you guys to look at the score, look at the time, and look at the field and realize that these guys are now going to dictate how we call the game. And that's something that's hard for new broadcasters to get right out of the gate. And that it's not, the expectation is not to know that. So the fact that these guys responded as well as they did as analysts and as broadcasters meant a lot to me, because it only further proved to me how quick and sharp they were. Like, they're sponges. Those guys are two of the smarter guys I think you'll ever be around in terms of just how their brains work. Like, Matt and Pat, for different reasons, have two of the more interesting minds I think I've had a chance to be around
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
but,
underline different reasons, but
different.
yeah, deeply captivating in their own ways.
Very much so, and very intelligent. And you can tell the gears were grinding in their heads, like, oh, I get that. You got it. And it was something that they recognized, not only as through the technical machinations of a broadcast, but also like, oh, right, this is a 7-point game. These guys were down for 21 a few minutes ago. Like, just like that, like in the flash of the game, even though it was a heavy comeback, it was a march to come back in that game. All of a sudden you blink and you go, oh, wow, it's 28-21. And there's a real chance that this becomes a tie game at some point. So I think to see them, when we got to that point, especially in the fourth quarter, recognize like, hey, we need to shift because this is real stuff. This is dramatic. And I think that played out. And I think you heard it, in particular from Pat, when McMillan scores the touchdown, throws the touchdown to McCleskey. Like, you heard it in his voice. He was freaking out. He was laughing. Like, it was the culmination of watching something take place that had some specialness, some uniqueness to it. And I don't think people who would just look at the schedule and say Houston, Tulane, who cares, like, understand. This game meant a lot to a lot of people that night because it wasn't a national stage. And I know Thursday Night Football maybe doesn't have the same swagger it used to in college because the NFL is, kind of taken a lot of that shine, and that's fine. But it means something to these two fan bases and to people who love college football and love that connectivity we talked about. This meant a lot to a lot of people. And the way the place erupted and the way that, people were celebrating that moment, that gave it, that gave us the proof of that. So it was great to be a part of that in a lot of different ways and a lot of different angles. It was really, really fun to be a part of that second half in particular.
All right, so let's talk about that ending sequence, which is obviously the thing that everyone's going to remember, want to talk about. First off, the fake knee. I went back and I listened to your call. You did exactly what I did. They're coming to the line of scrimmage. My brain was, okay, is there any chance that they can make a run at this? Probably not. We're going to play for overtime. You had great lines about the storyline of McMillan, the storyline of King, and we get to see it unfold in overtime. And then, boom.
And then, boom. It was, it caught us. I do feel like I was certainly caught by surprise, but I called it in a fashion that I feel like was the fan in me kind of coming out. And
by
I
the way,
you did too.
No, you actually kicked my butt because I was so stunned by the whole thing. I called it as like borderline a regular, whatever it was, 18-yard run or whatever it ended up happening to be. I listened back and I go, man, you were so caught off guard by that. It just came out normal.
And we were so caught off guard by it that I just erupted like a fan. And I was like, oh my God, it's a fake. Like it's, and I think that's, again, something you only really see in college football. That's not something you see busted out in a pro game very often. And I love that we had that reaction, because I'm not rooting for Tulane because I care about Tulane more than I care about Houston or anything. For us, it's what's the funniest, stupidest, craziest, like most entertaining thing that can happen. And if you react that way, I think fans appreciate you. Now, you're going to get a lot of hate from particular fan bases, and that's it's part of the territory. Like, you have to understand that when you work nationally, you're gonna get people writing angry tweets, and they're not angry at you. They're looking for a punching bag because their team's playing poorly, and you are the easiest, most accessible, most visible person to attack in that moment without attacking the players themselves. Which, by the way, I remember doing the Egg Bowl last year. And Ole Miss's kicker misses that extra point that eventually loses them the game. The kid got death threats that, within 10 minutes on Twitter. It's terrible. So they're looking for a punching bag, and I'd much rather us be the punching bag for some misinterpreted language or tone than you take it out on the kid that's legitimately feeling awful at that point. So that's fine. That comes with the territory. But the fans of football, the fans of college football, and probably the fans of that team that are also reacting similarly, they're going to connect with you. And that's what means a lot to me. That's what meant a lot to me calling college football, is there's that same reaction, that surrender Cobra image from that Michigan State game. The kid bent over the railing at UVA in that Notre Dame Virginia game. The sad guns up when Texas Tech is getting blown out by 50 against Oklahoma State. Like, those are lasting images because we're all kind of reacting, even as broadcasters, in some form or fashion to some degree, just like that. And that is that play, that fake knee and the run to the left. Like, that's what that play personifies. It's the shock, it's the surprise, it's the innovation, it's the risk taking that you see at this level that you may not see in the NFL. So I think all of us were so taken aback by it. And then we recognized, hey, now they have a legitimate shot to win this game, and we have to reset. It was nice to have the timeout after that play, because then we got to relive that play and replay and be able to enjoy it again as fans, and then reset to, all right, well, here's the situation now. They have a fresh set of downs. They're in plus territory, and they've got plenty of time to set up. We're thinking
a field goal,
2
that
plays,
was our
like
thought. Yeah.
the same, exactly. Like, now your head goes to, let's set up 2 plays, let's get 15, 20 yards, and let's set it up for Merrick Glover, and let's let him, try to win the game for us. So that's how we're thinking, and then.
Right.
I'm sure you're going to allude to.
Exactly.
You out of the next play.
Yeah. Where does your brain go? Because I can kind of remember mine. The minute that he split the 3 tackles, not 1, not 2, there was 3 tackles that McCleskey broke, and it was nothing but turf in front of him. And my brain made an immediate switch when that happened. What was your brain when he broke those 3 tackles?
Yeah, I think you can kind of hear it in our voices when, like, just the recognition from our eyes to our brain to our mouth. Like, you can kind of almost feel that recognition in the half second, where you see 2 defenders charging in, the safety in the corner, both kind of colliding towards Jalen at the same time. So again, you have to assume, not fully, but you have to, I shouldn't use the word assume. You have to anticipate that he could get tackled there, because then you got to look at the clock. You got to check to see if there are any timeouts left. You got to make sure that you have to be, in football, especially when there are these sudden bursts. I would say in football and baseball, with these sudden bursts, you have to be very situationally aware. And when we see the defenders coming in, you have to be ready to call the tackle. It's past the sticks at that point, so the clock would reset. Run up to the line, either spike it, or I can't remember now if there was a timeout remaining, but if you have the timeout, then you call the timeout. And then, again, as you said, Glover comes out probably to set up the game-winning field goal. When he spins away, the call of me saying McCleskey's name, I think I said, launches down the middle for McCleskey. And then as soon as you hit the second, syllable of McCleskey is when we saw that collision of the defenders. And you pointed out what you recognized, and I saw the same thing you did, was just that there was nobody in front of him. Now, there were a couple guys chasing. which also I think I remember like one of the guys kind of gave up on the play, maybe to save some time. Like I don't want to blame him for it, but like kind of was like, all right, I guess this is happening.
Yeah, he throttled down at about the 5-yard line. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like I was like, that's the only but that's the closest defender. There was nobody in front of him, and it's like launches down the middle for McCleskey, and my voice got high on the end of Jalen's name, and it stayed at that pitch, and he breaks free. Jalen McCleskey, touchdown. They take the lead with 3 seconds to go, and then you see the mob of Jalen from the entire roster, and then I just let my guy Pat McAfee go into his stream of consciousness, and he just goes off. And go back and listen to Pat, because he is so enthused and so excited to see something like this happen. And then at the end of it, he just forgot Jalen's name.
Yes.
And he's like, he had to throttle. Speaking of throttling that, he had to like throttle down to remember Jalen's name. But just that genuine enthusiasm and excitement, like I was blown away. It's one of the signature moments of our time last year working together, and it's one of the signature games I've gotten a chance to call. Signature moments I've had the chance to call. It's one of those things that SportsCenter will play over and over again on Twitter, on their Twitter feed and on Instagram, and they'll use the call in the highlight, and they'll give us some time in the post game to talk about Willie and the program, and we show our interview with Jalen with Molly as SportsCenter takes over. Like when moments like that happen, they're easily and quickly recognized by everybody. So there's producers at SportsCenter going, yep, let's go post game with that, because that's too good. That's too cool. We gotta talk to that guy. Let's get a few minutes with Adam and Matt and Pat in the booth. Let's get Molly's interview, and then we'll do the recap, because there's nothing else going on really sport wise. There's an NFL game, and that was it. We're gonna do the NFL game later. We'll have plenty of coverage on that. But this was cool. This was immediate. This was exciting. Let's replay that, and that gives moments like that a little bit more shelf life, and that's going to be a moment that people still talk about. Our calls in some form or fashion are going to be associated with that moment, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm happy that you and I got a chance to be around for something like that. It's rare that we get moments like that. They're lightning in a bottle moments, and you just hope that you get a chance to witness more of those, and you hope you get a chance to see something special that night. We did.
I think a question that fans would probably have, and you've probably been asked it too, is as a broadcaster, you've got a guy like McAfee in the booth. Look, we're all taught, especially on television, to essentially shut up and let the pictures tell the story in those big moments. But in addition, you've got a guy like McAfee. Are you shutting up immediately because you know that in the back of your head?
Yeah, and I'm doing that. Here's what was so great about the guys. There's definitely that traditional broadcaster, especially in college football. You get a Saturday night, 90,000 people at, Lincoln, Nebraska, or 100,000 at Penn State, or
the shoe, or whatever.
Like pick your spot in whatever conference that's just got that magical aura about it. And yeah, I don't want to talk that much. I like being a minimalist, not in the sense that I'm going to talk less. I like being a minimalist in the sense of I've got this added element of crowd reactions, pictures that our director is going to show you. That's an element. That's an added weapon that you have to really, I think, push the broadcast to a different level of appreciation. You want to see fan reactions. You want to hear that noise on the biggest plays. So there's something special about that. And the traditionalist in all of us is like, let that be a star as well. Let that be an element to the broadcast that's appreciated. When you're at the point where you have somebody like Pat, whose genuine enthusiasm is going to match, or maybe even further the appreciation of the crowd, the reactions, and again, the crowd that night. It's not a massive stadium. It's not, it's not supposed to. I mean, Yeoman is 30,000 strong, and it sounds and looks great when it's full, but it's not going to overtake you crowd noise wise the way that those other places that we talked about, or it's not meant to. That's okay. But the reactions were so genuine and pure that when you add Pat's reaction to it, it feels like it matches the same level of intensity that everybody who was mobbing Jalen, every fan who was going nuts in front of us and across the way because of that incredible play, and anybody who's watching at home or watching at a bar, or whatever, in town that night, Pat's kind of really accessing those same feelings that every Tulane fan is feeling. And in that sense, I feel like you just got to let him go, and you got to let him experience this in his unique way. And that's what makes him Pat, and that's what makes him as popular as he is. And I think it's incumbent on us to sometimes recognize that, you know what, that's also a weapon. To have somebody like that who's been away from the sport for a while, who's back in it and experiencing Tulane and Houston. Again, I'm not going to pretend that this is Michigan, Ohio State. We're not going to do that. But you know what? It's impactful for a lot of people, and it means a lot to a lot of people, and it meant a lot to us calling that game, and it meant a lot to that guy who clearly was enthused and excited to be back in a situation where something like that has the ability to take place. And I think you have to appreciate that as much as you would appreciate the wave of crowd noise at Neyland Stadium on a Saturday night.
All right, so let's round out the evening. Just like there's this special buzz to a locker room after a big moment, after a big game, there's always a special buzz to a booth or to a broadcast crew after you witness something really big. You leave the stadium, you go back to the hotel, whatever it is. For you guys, for Hasselbeck, McAfee, McGrath, Amin, what moments do you remember after the game, talking it over with your crew, with the production truck? What stands out about that buzz after the game?
If I remember correctly, I think Pat and Matt both got invited back into the Tulane locker room, and I think had an opportunity to either speak with Willie or speak to some of the guys on the team. And I think that meant a lot to the crew, and that meant a lot to Pat and Matt. And we were just waiting, we're in our car, I'm just sitting in the car, and I let those guys go because, again, I've got a 5 a.m. flight the next day. I remember distinctly because I had a Dodgers-Rockies game to do the next night on TV in Los Angeles. So, which of course was a game that got added 2 days prior. They're like, hey, can you fly to LA on Friday? And then, and now I'm remembering, I had a Sunday game in New England. I had a Patriots game that Sunday. So I went New Orleans to LA cross country to Boston, and then did the Patriots game on Sunday, and then flew back home after that. So my head is already once we get through the car ride back to the hotel where there is that buzz, I can't believe that play. Oh, that quote was so good. You're remembering that these are, again, guys who are doing their third games together with our crew. And we get that, we had a wild game the week prior with North Carolina and Wake Forest that went right down to the wire. They were still buzzing off that. And I remember that feeling. Of still feeling electric after the game. And again, I got to be up at 3:30 the next morning to go to the airport, and I'm wired. And that doesn't go away, I don't think, when you have moments like that, regardless of the sport. When you have that, especially a night game, it is hard to settle back in. So I think I took that, 45 minutes from the time that we were done to the time that we eventually got back to the hotel. I think I took that 45 minutes to just live in that and soak it in and appreciate it with the guys and with Molly and our crew. And once I got back into the hotel, we were all fried, because Pat had been doing the radio show, his radio show from site. They've been traveling this box truck around the country. So he'd been up earlier that morning to do the radio show, then do the production meeting. I had done his radio show from his truck that day. So all of us are just buzzing, and then we get back and we're like, yeah, I'm going to skip the bar, man. I think I got to go. I got to go to bed. So, for me and Andrew, this too, especially when it comes to overlap season, you got to purge. You got to purge that last game and flush it from your head and your mind and focus on the next thing. Because the next night I'm talking about, Walker Buehler and the Dodgers, and getting ready for the playoffs. So you don't get to live with it as long as you would like, probably, but it is nice to have that buzz after the game and still feel wired and connected to it. And like I said, the whole cycle of social media kept that alive for another day. And, even on the flight the next morning, I was still getting tweets, from people. I'm like, oh, that was awesome. I just saw the highlight. What a game. Thanks for coming to New Orleans. Like, it was really great.
Hey, thank you for doing this look back.
Yeah, man.
That was a pretty special night. Glad you could be a part of it. And thanks for talking. Appreciate your time.
Anytime, pal. Good to talk with you anytime. And good to see you finding your footing in New Orleans as well after we got a chance to cross paths what feels like a millennium ago in Lane Stadium the first time I'd been there. So I'm glad things are going well for you too, pal.
Okay, that concludes the Willie Fritz Show on the podcast. Please give Andrew Allegrella a follow. He does pretty good work. Also, please subscribe to their podcast. It's called The Current. You'll be up to date with Tulane Athletics. That is their new podcast. So I'm glad to see this new podcast format. So that's my opinion. What they said about this game against Houston, I was there. I was there that night. I saw that crowd. When Jalen McCluskey made that touchdown catch, I was ecstatic of the game. I mean, look, people don't realize, look, that game was a big deal. It was an absolutely big deal. Tulane and Houston. When they take the field next time, that's not going to be the same result, because I'm pretty sure Houston most likely will be a different team. Now, just like that Navy game 2 years ago, I was there at Yeoman Stadium when they made that 2-point conversion and won the football game. So people, unless you read, unless you've been there, unless you watch the game, stuff like that, you don't know what's going on until that time. So great interview with the voice of the game, the guy that done the game last year, Houston and Tulane. So that was also Willie Fritz was on. Dr. Greg Stewart was on. So great Willie Fritz Show. Once again, thanks for joining us today. We will be back on later for NFL football. We'll have the Bengals and Browns. That'll be at 7 p.m. on Sports Talk, Sports Cast, excuse me. So once again, thanks for joining us here on this edition of Sports Talk with Kerry Wehmeyer Show. We did have the Willie Fritz Show. Once again, please like, share, and follow us on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Talk Kerry. Also on Facebook, follow me on Facebook. Also, follow me on the YouTube channel. We are going to be on there through Sunday. We'll have our podcast on Sunday. Sports Time New Orleans will come back on Sunday. We will not go live. We'll record it. So if you want to come in, just let us know. We'll put you in the podcast. So we will be recorded. Also, you can follow me on the Tumblr page as well. Also, follow me on the official flagship of Sports Talk, and also play-by-play coverage of LSU, Tulane, New Orleans Saints football, and high school football once we begin in October 2nd. So October 2nd will be the day. We'll have our high school football on the air. Tomorrow night, we will have high school football on the air once more. We'll have games across the country. We'll go live in-game reports throughout the country. We'll go through all the games. We'll do that tomorrow night. That will be the Friday Night High School Football Show here on StreamYard. So once again, also you can follow me on the Twitch channel. Also follow me on the Instagram. Also follow me on Skype. You can I'll send just send me your information. I'll give you let you come in. Now also you can follow me on LinkedIn, and also you can follow me on the Sports Talk with Kerry Wehmeyer show blog page. That's on blogspot.com. We are on Blogspot as well. So once again, and then if you want to come on the show, If we're going to be on the podcast, record, or something like that, or live, you can come on, send us an email or send us a DM through Facebook and Twitter. That would be the best options. If you're a Facebook friend of mine, if you want to come on, you can do that. You can follow me at those addresses I gave you. So, okay, once again, everybody have a good rest of your Thursday afternoon. And we'll be back later with NFL football coverage on Sportscaster. So Sportscaster only, no YouTube due to copyright restraints. We cannot air games on Facebook and YouTube. We can only do it on Sportscaster. So the address I gave you, you can go on there and come on there and video chat with us as long as you can. So once again, everybody have a good rest of your Thursday. We'll be back later.